Hey everyone, my name is Anne and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to crochet this puff stitch sweater. I will be making a small here, but sizes X small to 3X large are also included in this tutorial and in the written pattern that I have linked down below. So here are the supplies that you're going to be needing. So here are all of the supplies that you're going to be needing for this project. I'm going to be using 3 skeins of this Craft Smart category 4 yarn with a pair of scissors, any kind you can use. I also have a 5.5mm hook. And then I have a large tapestry needle for seaming and such. So here are all of the supplies, so let's go ahead and get started on working the pattern next. So the first thing that we're going to be working on is that we're going to do our plain back panel. So the back panel does not have the heart shape that we're going to be doing. That's going to be for the front panel. But here is the first thing that we're going to do. I'm just going to be doing a sample for you guys and then you can kind of go from there. So over here I have my category 4 yarn and this is my 5.5mm hook. The first thing I'm going to do is just make a slip knot, and you can do that any way you would like. Once you have made this slip knot, we're going to begin by making a chain of 58, which is going to be our very first foundation chain. To make a chain, you just want to yarn over and then just pull through with your hook. Again, just yarn over and pull through, and you want to do that until you have 58 chains in total. And also, I almost forgot to mention that I have all the sizes listed down below at the screen if you're doing a different size, but I'm doing a size small, so I'm going to be doing a total of 58 chains. When you have finished working up all of your chain, we're now going to begin on row 1 and we're going to be doing single crochets for this pattern, which is very easy. To begin on row 1, we're going to skip this very first chain and then insert our hook into the second chain. We're going to do a single crochet. To do a single crochet, just insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both of those loops. Doing this again, I'm going to insert my hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, insert my hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and by the end of this you should have a total of 57 rows because remember we skipped that 1 chain for our turning chain. I'm just going to go ahead, work up the single crochets, and then I'm going to see you guys back once I have reached the very end of my work. So I have just finished working all the way down my chain with these single crochets, as you guys can see. When you have reached the very end, you do just want to go ahead and chain 1 and turn your work. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch, it is just our turning chain. So now moving on to row 2, we're going to skip our turning chain and insert our hook into this first stitch. We're going to work a single crochet once again. So I'm just going to insert my hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, insert my hook into that next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then just keep on working these single crochets all the way across your row until you have reached the very end, and then chain and turn your work. I have made it back here once again with my row 2. I just basically did the same exact thing, working single crochets into each stitch all the way down my row. And as I mentioned previously, you just want to chain 1 and turn your work. And again, that chain 1 does not count as a stitch. So to continue this pattern, you just want to repeat this row, which is row 2, until you have 72 rows for your back panel. Once again, I did list all of these sizes for each size you want to be doing. And once you have completed your 72 rows, this is what your back panel should be looking like. So this is after 72 rows, and we're almost done with our back panel, or our back bodice. We're not going to cut and fasten off once you reach the end of your 72 rows. We're actually going to continue directly into working the first shoulder strap, which is going to be the next part of this video. Let's go ahead and get started on our first shoulder strap. Getting started on our first shoulder strap, I did chain 1 and turn my work. Beginning on row 1, the first thing that we're going to do is beginning into this very first stitch, we're going to work single crochets, except this time we're only going to be going into 20 stitches across, not all the way across our row, just into 20 stitches. When you have finished working these 20 stitches across your row, we're now going to be doing our first single crochet decrease into the next stitch. To work a single crochet decrease, I'm going to zoom up here for you guys. To do a single crochet decrease, you want to insert your hook, pull up a loop, then insert your hook into that next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops, and that is going to be our decrease for the rest of the pattern. From here, you can just chain 1 and turn your work as you normally would. Moving on to row 2, we are going to do another decrease, except we're going to do it into the very first stitch of row 2. Same thing that we did last time. I'm just going to insert my hook into the first stitch, pull up a loop, insert your hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. Now from here, you can just single crochet into each stitch all the way across, chain and turn. And I'll just chain and turn my work. Now moving on to row 3, into this very first stitch, we are going to single crochet into each stitch all the way across, except this time you want to make sure that you have 2 stitches at the end of your row. When we have those 2 stitches at the end of the row, I'm going to show you guys how to decrease one more time. When you have these 2 stitches at the end of your row, we're going to do another decrease, just like this, chain and turn your work. So to continue this pattern for our first shoulder strap, you want to repeat those last 2 decrease rows, which are row 2 and row 3, until you have a total of 9 rows. But basically, you should be decreasing on one side of your work, while the other side stays a nice, clean, straight edge. I'm going to go ahead, work up my 9 rows, and then I'm going to see you guys back once I am all done. So I have now made it back here with my 9 decrease rows. We decreased at the end of this side, then this side should have been a nice, clean, straight edge. Once I reached the end, I actually did cut my yarn off, making sure to leave a long tail for seaming, or a long tail to weave in our work. But now I'm just going to fasten off, so I'm just going to pull the yarn through that loop, fasten off nicely just like this. And now that we have one side of our shoulder strap all done, we're now going to be moving on to the second shoulder strap, which is basically the same thing. So let's just move on with those steps. So now we're going to be moving on to the second shoulder strap, which is basically the same thing as I mentioned. I'm going to first make a slip knot as you normally would. Now from here, we are going to skip 13 stitches from the first unworked stitch. So I'm just going to zoom in here. This is a worked stitch from our first shoulder strap, and this is the very first unworked stitch, so I'm going to count from here. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Then once you have reached this 13th stitch, you want to insert your hook into the next stitch, so into that 14th stitch. Now from here, we are just going to slip stitch to secure. So just yarn over and pull through everything. That's going to be our slip stitch. Oops. And beginning on row 1, I'm just going to chain 1. Into this very first stitch, we're going to do a decrease. So I'm going to insert my hook into that first stitch where we did that chain, pull up a loop. Into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3. So we decrease into this very first stitch. Now you can just continue on crocheting into each stitch all the way across until the end of your row, chain and turn your work. And you should have the same number of stitches for the first row of our first shoulder strap, same as here. I'll just chain and turn my work. Moving on to row 2, we are going to single crochet into each stitch all the way across until you have 2 stitches at the end of your row remaining. When I have these 2 stitches at the end of my row, I'm going to do that decrease, insert my hook, pull up a loop, into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3, chain and then turn my work. Moving on to row 3, into this very first stitch, we're going to do another decrease. And then just single crochet into each stitch all the way across. You can just chain and turn your work. To continue this pattern for our second shoulder strap, this is basically the same thing that we did for the first shoulder strap. You just want to repeat those last 2 decrease rows, which is row 2 and row 3, and you should be decreasing on one side of your work, while this side stays a straight edge just like last time. Repeat those 2 rows until you have a total of 9 rows, and then you can just cut and fasten off. I'm going to work up my 9 rows, and then I'm going to see you guys back once I am all done. So this is what my back bodice is looking like after I have completed the first and second shoulder strap. I did cut and fasten off once I reached the end of the second shoulder strap. And this is what all of our work is looking like. So after we have done everything for the back bodice, we're now just going to set this piece aside. And now we're going to get started on working the front bodice with our heart shape in the middle. So let's go ahead and get started on those steps. Now we're going to be moving on to the fun part of this pattern, which is our front panel with our little heart made with these popcorn or puff stitches. So we're going to begin the front panel the same exact way that we did for our back panel. So do a chain of 58, or for whatever size that you're doing. I'm doing a size small once again, so I'm going to do the same thing, chain of 58, and then same thing and then work single crochet rows, except this time instead of doing the full 72 rows that we did for the back panel, we're actually going to be stopping at row 18, and then the next rows are going to be with our puff stitches, which I'm going to show you guys. But I'm just going to work up these 18 rows of these regular single crochets, and then I'm going to see you guys back to work on the grid with our puff stitch or popcorn stitch. When you have finished working your 18 rows, I'm just going to be doing 4 rows because I'm just showing you guys a sample. We're now going to begin on our puff stitch or our popcorn stitch over here. I'm going to be placing a large grid to show exactly what you need to do to make this heart shaped with our single crochets and our stitch pattern. I'm going to work a couple of rows with you guys so you get a good idea of what you need to do. So beginning on our first puff stitch row, or popcorn stitch row, I'm going to chain and turn my work. So the first puff stitch is going to be directly in the middle of our sweater. So I'm going to do 28 single crochet stitches, puff stitch, and then 28 single crochet stitches. I will show you how to do that puff stitch. So I'm going to first work 28 single crochets, and then I'm going to see you guys back to work that stitch. So I just finished up working my 28 stitches coming across my row. So now the 29th stitch should be the very middle stitch of your sweater. So into this 29th stitch, we're going to do a puff stitch. To do a puff stitch, I'm going to work 3 single crochets into this one stitch. So here's my first single crochet, here's my first single crochet, and then into this very same stitch, I'm going to work a second single crochet. And then this is my third single crochet into this same stitch just like this. Now this is where it gets a little bit weird. I'm going to take out my hook. Now you want to go back into the very first stitch that we worked. So here's 1, 2, 3. Insert your hook back into that same loop. Now pull up the loop and then just pull through both of those loops to finish off. And this is our very first puff stitch. I'm going to be showing this puff stitch multiple times, so if you didn't get it the first time, I'm going to be doing it many more times. And now you should have 28 stitches left of your row, so I'm going to work that up, chain and turn my work. So I just finished working the single crochets until the end of my row, chained and turned my work. Now this is really important. So in between each puff stitch or popcorn stitch row, you want to work 1 regular single crochet row. So the next row is just going to be single crocheting into each stitch all the way across, no fancy stitching whatsoever. And then the next row, we're going to do our puff stitch once again. But I'm going to quickly work across my row, and then I'll see you guys back once I reach the end. I just finished working a regular base single crochet row all the way across. Now I'm just going to turn my work, and now we're looking at the bad side or the wrong side of our work. So if we're looking back at our grid, we can see that we're going to be doing 3 puff stitches right in the center of our work. So if you want an exact stitch count, you should be working 27 stitches across, then puff stitch 3 times, and then 27 stitches across once again. But usually I don't do an exact stitch count. I just look where the middle of the puff stitch is, and then I'm going to put 3 right on top of it. So I'm going to do 27 single crochets, and then I'm going to meet you guys back to do 3 puff stitches in the center. When you have worked those 27 stitches across, we're now going to do our 3 puff stitches. I'm going to zoom up. We're going to do these 3 puff stitches in the middle of our sweater. So once again, to do a puff stitch, we want to work 3 single crochets into 1 stitch. So here is 1, 2, and then 3. Now this is where it gets weird. I'm going to release my hook, go back into the first stitch that we single crocheted. So here's 1, 2, 3 back. Insert your hook right into that stitch again, and then yarn over with that first loop that we released from, and then pull through. Doing that into the next stitch as well, I'm going to work 3 single crochets. So it's 1, 2, and then 3. Release, go back into that third or first stitch, and yarn over. Then here's our last one, 1, 2, and 3. Go back into that first stitch with that same loop, pull it through, and then that is our 3 puff stitches. That's what it looks like. Now you can just finish up working your 27 single crochets, chain and turn your work. So now this is what our puff stitch sweater is looking like with our second puff stitch row. And I cannot emphasize this enough, we have to do a base single crochet row in between every single puff or popcorn stitch row. That is really important, or then your sweater is going to look super wonky if you don't do a single crochet row in between each set. So I'm going to do my single crochets coming all the way across, and then I'm going to meet you guys back to do the next puff stitch row, which it looks like we're going to do 5 puff stitches in the center of our sweater. But I'll go work that up and I'll see you guys back shortly. So once you have finished, once again, that base single crochet row, we're going to move on to our next puff stitch row. And this time, if I zoom up, our grid pattern says that we should be doing 5 puff stitches in the center of our sweater. If you want an exact stitch count, you should be single crocheting into 26 stitches this time, and then work 5 puff stitches and then 26 single crochets. I'm going to do those 26 single crochets, and then I'm going to meet you guys back to work those puff stitches just one more time. So I just made it back here with the center of my sweater. I worked 26 single crochets, and now I'm in the middle, and now we're going to be working those 5 puff stitches, and this is row 3 of that puff stitch. I'm going to quickly work these puff stitches because I've kind of already showed you what this is going to look like. So I'm going to work 3 single crochets and then go back. This is the hard part. Go back to that stitch and then just pull through. So that's 1 puff stitch. 1, 2, 3. Go back, open that like this, and then here is my next one. Then I think this is number 4. Yep, I just have 1 more to do. Just like this, and I'm just going to turn it around. That looks really good. Now I'm just going to finish up by single crocheting to the end of this row, chain and turn your work. So we just finished up working our 3rd puff stitch row, and just to remember, you guys should be working a single crochet row in between every single puff stitch row that we do. Just following this exact grid pattern until you have all of your stitch pattern, and once you have your whole heart made in the center of your sweater, you do want to work 14 regular single crochet rows, just like this. Then once you have worked your regular 14 single crochet rows after your heart, then we're going to repeat the same exact process that we did for the first shoulder strap and the second shoulder strap. Just to recap on that a bit, you just want to single crochet into 20 stitches, decrease, and then you want to decrease into the first stitch and then decrease into the last stitch of the next row. Repeat that until you have 9 rows in total. Then to begin on the second shoulder strap, you want to skip 13 stitches, insert your hook into that 14th stitch, work a decrease, go all the way down, come back and work a decrease into the last stitch. For the next row, work a decrease into the first stitch, then repeat those 2 decrease rows until you have a total of 9 rows for your second shoulder strap. And then of course you can cut and fasten off on both ends like I've already done. And now that's going to make up our entire front panel. I really hope that made sense. Yeah, I really hope. And now that is going to complete our entire front panel. I really hope that all made sense to you guys. Once we have our back bodice and our front bodice, we're now going to move on to working the sleeves. So let's go ahead and move on with those steps. Now we're going to be working on both of our sleeves. Of course, you have to do this twice for 2 of our sleeves. So this is what my first sleeve looks like. It is very easy, very simple for this project. Just to get started on our sleeve, I'm going to first make a slip knot. After this slip knot, we're going to do a chain of 9. However, you can make your sleeve however long you would like. I'm just choosing to do short sleeves over here, so I'm going to do a chain of 9, but you can do 3/4, a long sleeve, it does not matter. Now that I have my chain of 9 all done, beginning into the second chain from our hook, we're going to single crochet into each chain all the way across. When you reach the end of your chain, we're just going to chain 1 and turn our work as normal. Now skipping this first turning chain and inserting our hook into this first stitch, we're going to work all the way across our sleeve, and you should have a total of 8 stitches. Then once you reach the end, I'm going to chain and turn my work. Now to continue this pattern for our sleeve, you just want to repeat row 2 with our regular single crochet rows until you have a total of 46 rows, and this is what your sleeve should be looking like after 46 rows. And again, I'm just doing short sleeves. You can make this however long you would like. And once we have both of our pieces, we're now going to move on to working the borders. So let's go ahead and move on with those steps. So the last element to our sweater before we start the assembly process is going to be making our border, which is basically all the same but at different lengths. So this is going to be our bottom border, this is going to be our collar, and this is going to be our two sleeve borders, which are exactly the same. And as I mentioned, these are basically all the same except they are in different lengths. So for our bottom border, we're going to do the same thing except we're going to have a total of 73 rows. For our collar, it is exactly the same thing except we're going to have a total of 36 rows. And then for both of our sleeve borders, we're going to have a total of 26 rows. But just to get you guys started on working these border, over here I have my 4.5 millimeter hook. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a slip knot. From here, we're going to be making a chain of 8. However, you can make your border however thick you would like. This is what a chain of 8 looks like. So I have 7 stitches in total for each of these. I'm going to make a chain of 8. When you have finished your chain of 8, we're going to begin on row 1. So to do row 1, we're going to skip these first 2 chains and then inserting our hook into the third chain of our row, we're going to do a double crochet. To work a double crochet, you just want to yarn over with your hook, insert your hook into that third chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then yarn over, pull through 2. Doing this again, I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into that next chain. I'm going to insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. One more time, I'm just going to yarn over, insert into the next chain, pull up a loop, pull through 2, then just work these double crochets into each chain all the way across. You should have a total of 7 stitches once you reach the end. When you have reached the end of this first row, we're going to chain 2 and turn our work. Now, when we were first doing this pattern, we did a chain of 1, but this time for our border, we're actually going to do a chain of 2, and this actually does count as our first stitch. So beginning on row 2, we are going to skip this very first stitch, and then insert our hook into the second stitch. We're going to do a back bar or back loop double crochet. A back bar or back loop double crochet is the same thing as a regular double crochet, but instead of going through both of these loops as you normally would, we're only going to be going into that back bar or back loop. So I'm just going to yarn over as we normally would. Now this time I'm only going to be inserting my hook into the very back loop, then yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Doing this again, I'm going to yarn over, only insert my hook into that back bar or back loop, pull up a loop, 2 and then 2, yarn over, insert my hook only into this back bar, pull through 2, pull through 2, and then just keep on working these back bar double crochets until you have 1 stitch at the end of your row. When you have this last stitch at the end of your row, this should be the chain of 2 that we did for row 1. We're going to work 1 regular double crochet. So into this very last stitch, I'm going to do 1 regular double crochet. Then I'll just chain 2 and turn my work. Again, that chain 2 does count as our first stitch. Then you just want to repeat row 2 with these back bar double crochets until you have 73 rows for your bottom border, 36 rows for your collar, and then both 26 rows for your sleeve. I'm just going to work one more row with you guys just because it's a very short row, why not? So the same thing that we did last time, I'm going to skip this first stitch, insert my hook into the second stitch. I'm going to do a back bar or back loop double crochets. I'm going to work all the way across here until I have one stitch at the end of my row. And then when you have this last stitch, you can just work one regular double crochet to finish off. Oops. Let's get right in there. And then chain 2 and turn your work. So when you have finished up all of your borders, like I already have, as you guys can see, we're now going to move on to working the assembly process, which is going to be the very last step to our sweater. So let's go ahead and get started with that section of the video. Alrighty guys, now we're going to be moving on to the very last step of our project, which is going to be assembling our sleeves, our bodice, and then all of our borders together. The first thing that we're going to do is that I have my tapestry needle and some extra yarn. I'm just going to turn my work to the side because the first thing that we're going to be is seaming both of these sides up. So to seam our sides, we're going to make sure that all of our work is facing the good side. So over here I have my good side facing my good side, so we should be looking at the wrong side of our work. And what we're going to do here, and we're going to basically just beginning into this very bottom corner of our sides, we're going to whip stitch all the way up the side until we have 6.5 inches from the top remaining. That 6.5 inches from the top is going to leave room for our sleeve. So over here I just have a ruler, and I'm just going to go all the way up until I have this 6.5 inches mark. To show you guys how to whip stitch, I'm going to get a little bit closer here. And to whip stitch, I'm going to take my tapestry needle. I'm going to insert it into the back loop of the first stitch from our front panel, and then into the back loop of the next panel. And then just pull straight through. I'm going to come all the way back around, insert my hook into the next 2 loops of the front and back panel, and then just pull straight through. There we go, just like this. Going into the next back loops. Here we go. Pull through. I'm going to do this a few more times. So now I'm just going to continue on whip stitching just as I showed you until I have the 6.5 inches, and I'll do that on both of my sides, and I'm going to see you guys back once I am all done. So I have just made it back here, seaming up my bodice. I whip stitched all the way up the sides until I had 6.5 inches from the top for our armholes. I did that on both sides. I have a 6.5 inch gap right here. And then I forgot to mention this, but you also want to whip stitch together the 2 shoulder straps. So I just went from the very top corner to the end of the shoulder strap on both sides just to seam this right up. And once we have our main bodice section all seamed, we can now whip stitch together the collar and our 2 sleeves together. So over here I have 2 of my sleeves. I have 2 sleeves. I'm just going to fold this in half, just like this. I want to whip stitch all the way down the edge for both sides. And then once you have whip stitched your sleeves in half together, over here and over here, you then want to take your border and then whip stitch together the border to the very edge of your work. And then you want to do that on both sides. whip stitch together all the way around until the end of your work. And then once you have that together, you can then place it right next to the armhole. It should fit nicely. And then go all the way around until the end of your work. Just to show you that again, once you have these two pieces together, just want to attach it to the side and then go all the way around until the end. This is it. You want to whip stitch together the border, so just fold it in half, then whip stitch this all the way around on the bottom edge. And then the very last thing I'm going to do off camera is just whip stitch together the collar. To whip stitch the collar, I'm just going to place it all the way around, making sure that it is evenly placed, and then go all the way around the head hole until the end of my work. And so I'm going to do the collar, the bottom border, sleeves, and the sleeve borders off camera, and then I'm going to see you guys back once I am all done with my sweater. Alrighty guys, I have now made it back here with my finished sweater. I seamed together the collar, and this is what it looks like. And I also did both of the sleeves just like this, and on the opposite side as well, of course. And the last thing that I seamed up was the bottom border, which looks really nice so far. So this is basically the end of your project. The last thing you would need to do is just weave in all of your loose ends to finish, but that is it for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and found it helpful, and I hope to see you guys back next time. Bye! If you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. If you bought this pattern, it would be super helpful if you left a positive review. But that's all guys, bye!